Well, it's time for our Tuesday Health Report, and joining us now is Africa 54 Health correspondent Linord Moudou with the latest news in the fight against Ebola.
A study led by scientists at the World Health Organization and Imperial College London found that although Ebola infection rates are lower in children than adults, babies and toddlers who get the disease have a far slimmer chance of survival. The researchers found that the virus, which causes hemorrhagic fever and induces internal and external bleeding, profuse vomiting and diarrhea, is killing 90% of infants in the current outbreak and around 80% of children between 1 to 4 years old. Dr. Christopher Dye is the Director of Strategy at WHO Team Leader on Ebola. He says, given the result of the study, children need specialized care.
One of the striking findings of our study is that very young children, infants and neonates, have a strikingly high mortality rate. More than 90% of children of that age group die from Ebola. In an Ebola epidemic, everybody needs special care, but the very youngest children need obviously very special care indeed. With that special care, we know that their survival rates can be improved. The question we face is how best to put that quality of care in place. In the way that we manage Ebola at the moment, very clearly, young children need prompt diagnosis, immediate care. They need close personal contact, not just of physicians, but also ideally with family members too.
The report, which was published recently in the New England Journal of Medicine, analyzed data on Ebola cases in children under 16 in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. Now, the U.S. National Institutes of Health says 2 experimental Ebola vaccines have shown positive results in a clinical trial conducted in Liberia. The clinical trial started in February and found that the vaccines from GlaxoSmithKline and biotech startup New Link Genetics Corp appeared to be safe when administered to patients exposed to Ebola virus. The GSK vaccine was developed with NIAID scientists, and the New Link vaccine was developed by the Public Health Agency of Canada. Each vaccine was given in a single injection and tested for safety and efficacy on more than 600 people in Liberia. The mid-stage clinical trial sponsored by the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, a branch of NIH. Dr. Anthony Fauci is the director of National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases.
The original purpose of the trial was to determine if you could protect people in Liberia, but right now, since there are essentially no new infections except for one very recent one in Liberia, that what we need to do is to collect data to determine whether or not it induces the kind of response that you would hope would be protected, but also in negotiations with authorities in the other West African countries, such as in Guinea and Sierra Leone, to see if we could extend the trial there. In phase 2, you want to get a good distribution. Since there were only 16% women, we're going to specifically try to correct that, so when we do the additional 900 to bring the total to 1,500, we'll have a relative equality between men and women in the study.
And the volunteers will be followed for at least a year with blood samples tested 6 and 12 months after vaccination to determine how long the immune response lasts. Now, Ebola has claimed the lives of more than 10,000 people in West Africa. Since last summer, researchers have rushed to get anti-Ebola vaccines into clinical trials. While it's too early to say that any of the potential vaccines work, well, some scientists say they are seeing strong results from some of the studies. VOA's Carol Pearson tells us more.
It's ironic. Just as the Ebola epidemic in West Africa seems to be waning, clinical trials of potential vaccines are underway there. A vaccine candidate is currently being tested in Guinea, where the Ebola virus is still active. Those likely to get the vaccine are medical workers and people who have been exposed to the virus. Liberia has so few new Ebola cases that a clinical vaccine trial started there may be continued in Sierra Leone or Guinea. At Emory University in the U.S., An investigational vaccine was given to an American doctor who may have been exposed to the virus at an Ebola treatment unit in Sierra Leone. Dr. Mark Mulligan reported the effects of the vaccine in the Journal of the American Medical Association.
We saw strong responses from the innate immune system, the immediate responses, the first defenders in our body, and also from the subsequent antibodies and T cells that we want a vaccine to produce.
The patient did not develop the Ebola virus, and he may not have been infected, but the immune response is what the doctors hoped to see. Dr. Thomas Geisbert was one of the researchers who developed this potential vaccine. Despite reports that researchers are closing in on an effective vaccine, he says there's still a lot of work to do.
A lot of these different vaccines and treatments were developed against one species of Ebola, and a particular strain of that species. So there are 5 different species of Ebola virus. 3 of those cause disease and morbidity and mortality in man.
Dr. Geisbert says a vaccine that might work against the Zaire Ebola virus, the species circulating in West Africa, might not work against another type of deadly Ebola virus. But if the vaccines are proven to work, Dr. Jesse Goodman says they could still be used in West Africa.
It could benefit people if this outbreak went the wrong way again, and even more importantly, these could be incredibly important tools for future outbreaks.
The results of the vaccine trial in Guinea could be available in July. Carol Pearson, VOA News, Washington.
And that's our Africa Health Report for today. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, thanks a lot, Linord. Be sure to watch Linord Moudou's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54.